The numbers danced across my screen, each figure a testament to 11 years of dedication. I'd memorized every supplier's payment schedule, every contractor's billing cycle. The familiar rhythm of my keyboard was interrupted by heavy footsteps approaching my office. My name is Ariel, and that morning marked the end of everything I'd built. Pack your things. Lucas towered in my doorway, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the modest surroundings of our family construction company. You have 30 minutes. I stared at him, my fingers frozen mid-keystroke. I'm in the middle of processing the monthly payments. That won't be necessary. His lips curved into what might have passed for a smile if it reached his eyes. My daughter will be taking over your position, effective immediately. Your daughter? The words felt hollow in my mouth. I wasn't aware you had. There's a lot you don't know about me, Ariel. He stepped closer, dropping a manila envelope on my desk. Your severance package, rather generous considering. The fluorescent lights caught his gold watch as he gestured dismissively. This man, who'd been absent for 27 years, who'd broken his father Robert's heart with fraudulent schemes, now stood here dismantling lives like he was shuffling papers. Does Robert know about this? I kept my voice steady, though my hands had begun to shake. My father is retired. I'm president now, and I'm making necessary changes. Emma appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Lucas, we need to discuss this. Ariel is essential to our operations. That'll be all, sister. His tone carried a warning that made Emma flinch. She caught my eye, an apology written across her features, before retreating. I thought of Robert, lying in his hospital bed just last week, gripping my hand as he spoke about family redemption and second chances. How proud he'd been when Lucas returned, promising change. Your father trusted me with this company's finances for over a decade, and now I'm trusting my daughter. He checked his watch. 25 minutes remaining. The rage built slowly, like cement hardening in my veins. You don't have a daughter. His smile widened, turning predatory. Prove it. I reached for my phone, but he was faster, snatching it from my desk. Company property. You'll find your personal effects have been boxed and will be shipped to your address. This is illegal. Sue me. He leaned in close, his cologne suffocating. But remember, litigation can be quite damaging to one's professional reputation, especially when certain discrepancies might be discovered in the accounts. My blood ran cold. You wouldn't dare. Try me. He straightened, adjusting his tie. 20 minutes, Ariel. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. I stood slowly, dignity the only weapon left in my arsenal. Robert will hear about this. My father is very ill. His voice dropped to a whisper. Stress could be fatal at this stage. Would you really want that on your conscience? The threat hung in the air between us. Through the glass walls of my office, I could see Daniel, Emma's husband, watching helplessly from the site manager's desk. The same desk where Robert used to sit, sharing coffee with me every morning, treating me like family. 18 minutes, Lucas announced, settling into my chair and beginning to delete files from my computer. I gathered my purse with trembling hands, my mind already racing ahead. Lucas might think he'd won, might believe he'd silenced me with threats and intimidation, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail about me. I knew where every body was buried in this company's books, every transaction, every decision, every secret. He'd just given me nothing left to lose. As I walked out, head high despite the tears threatening to fall, I heard him call after me, Do give my regards to my father next time you visit him in the hospital. Tell him how generous his son has become. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. The war had already begun in my mind, and Lucas had no idea what he'd just started. 3 days after my dismissal, Emma called me from a burner phone. Meet me at St. Michael's, the small chapel, not the main sanctuary. I found her lighting a candle in the empty chapel, her hands trembling. The stained glass cast colored shadows across her face, making her look older, worn. Lucas hired his mistress, she whispered, crossing herself mechanically. Not his daughter. She's 23, fresh out of community college. Can't tell a purchase order from a packing slip. I sat beside her, the wooden pew creaking. How bad? She approved a $100,000 payment to a supplier we've never used. Emma's voice cracked. When Daniel questioned it, Lucas threatened to fire him too. My fingers dug into the hymnal holder. The account numbers? Changed, all of them. Lucas moved everything to new banks. She turned to face me, her eyes red-rimmed. Dad's getting worse. The doctors say the stress. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of unspoken fears. Through the chapel windows, I watched construction workers on scaffolding, repairing the church's facade. Just last month, our company had donated materials for the project. Robert's idea, his way of giving back to the community. I made copies, Emma said suddenly, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. Before Lucas locked everyone out of the system, 3 years of transactions, supplier contracts, everything. I stared at the tiny device. Emma, if he finds out, he's killing the company. Her voice hardened. The company Dad built, the one Daniel and I were supposed to. She stopped, composing herself. Yesterday, he told our biggest client we're doubling our rates. No notice, no negotiation. He's driving them away deliberately, I realized. Clearing the deck for something else? Emma nodded. The mistress? She worked for a shell company in Nevada, one that specializes in property flipping and tax evasion. A door slammed somewhere in the church, making us both jump. Emma quickly pressed the drive into my hand. I have to get back. Lucas scheduled an all-hands meeting for noon. What about Daniel? He's documenting everything on the construction sites. Safety violations, missing materials, unauthorized personnel. She stood, straightening her blazer. We need your help, Ariel. You know the books better than anyone. If there's a way to prove what Lucas is doing. I slipped the drive into my pocket, feeling its weight like a burning coal. What about Robert? Does he know? Mom won't let anyone tell him, says his heart can't take it. Emma's lips trembled, but he keeps asking for you, says something feels wrong with the numbers. Heavy footsteps echoed from the main sanctuary. Emma tensed. I have to go. Be careful, Ariel. Lucas has been asking questions about your access to the old servers. After she left, I remained in the chapel, turning the drive over in my hands. Through the stained glass, the construction workers continued their careful restoration, piece by piece. Below them, a sign proclaimed, Preserving our heritage, building our future. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. The text message contained only an address and a time. Midnight, come alone, bring the drive. I deleted the message, my mind racing. The company's heritage, Robert's legacy, all of it balanced on a piece of plastic smaller than my thumb. Emma and Daniel were risking everything by helping me. If Lucas discovered their involvement, another buzz. This time, a photo. Robert in his hospital bed, looking frailer than ever. The caption read, Choose wisely. I stood, slipping the drive deep into my pocket. Lucas thought he could threaten and manipulate his way to victory. He assumed that firing me had neutralized the threat, but he'd forgotten something crucial. I'd spent 11 years watching Robert build this company on trust and integrity. I'd seen firsthand how he treated every employee like family, how he valued honor above profit, and family, real family, fights back. Walking out of the chapel, I pulled up the contact information for Robert's old friend at the Securities and Exchange Commission. It was time to start building my own case, piece by piece, just like those workers restoring the church above me. Lucas wanted a war? I'd give him one he'd never see coming. The SEC file landed on my kitchen table with a dull thud. Daniel slid into the chair across from me, his construction-weathered hands trembling as he opened it. Look at the dates, he said. The timestamps on Lucas's new supplier contracts predated his return by months. Each document bore Robert's signature, perfect replicas, down to the slight tremor from his illness. He's been planning this since before Robert got sick, I said, my coffee growing cold and forgotten. The shell companies, the forged signatures. I give me some bisto. There's more. Daniel pulled out his phone, showing me photos of empty storage units. Remember those material deliveries Lucas approved last week? 300,000 in steel and concrete that never arrived. The invoices were paid in full. A knock at my door made us both freeze. Through the peephole, I saw Emma, her face ashen. I let her in quickly, checking the hallway before closing the door. Mom just called, she said, collapsing onto my couch. Lucas brought his lawyer to the hospital. He's trying to get Dad to sign over his remaining shares. He can't, Daniel started, but Emma cut him off. Dad's on new medication. He's not always lucid. Her voice cracked. Lucas timed it perfectly, waited until Dad was barely conscious, then. The room tilted sideways. I steadied myself against the wall, remembering Robert's voice from my last visit. Something's wrong with the numbers, Ariel. I can feel it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Parking garage, level B2, now. I have to go, I said, gathering the SEC file. It's not safe, Daniel warned. Lucas has been asking questions about. That's exactly why I have to go. I grabbed my keys. If someone's willing to talk, this might be our only chance to prove what he's doing. Emma caught my arm. We found something else in the old project files. She glanced at Daniel, who nodded. Remember that accident at the Riverside site? The one that killed 2 workers? My stomach clenched. 7 years ago, Robert nearly shut down the company over it. Lucas was there that day, Daniel said quietly, under a different name. The safety inspector who signed off on the scaffolding? It was him. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Lucas hadn't just returned to steal the company. He'd been sabotaging it for years, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Another text. 10 minutes or the offer expires. I'll be careful, I promised, heading for the door. Lock up when you leave. And Emma, don't let your mother leave Robert alone with Lucas. Not for a second. The parking garage was a concrete tomb at this hour. My footsteps echoed as I descended to B2, the SEC file clutched to my chest like a shield. A figure emerged from behind a pillar. Not my mysterious informant, Lucas. Quite the little investigation you've been running, he said, stepping into the dim light. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I backed away, but another set of footsteps behind me revealed his mistress, blocking my escape route. The SEC file is very thorough, Lucas continued, closing the distance between us. But incomplete. You missed the most interesting part. He pulled out a folder of his own. Remember that audit you helped Dad with? The one that cleared the company after the Riverside accident? My blood ran cold. Your signature is all over it, Ariel. Verifying safety protocols that never existed, confirming inspections that never happened. His smile turned predatory. 2 dead workers. That's manslaughter at least. Unless what? Unless you help me convince my father that selling is the best option for everyone's safety. He held out his hand. The SEC file, please. Consider it a gesture of good faith. I clutched the file tighter, mind racing. Everything we'd gathered, all the evidence. Think carefully, Lucas whispered. Prison would be such a waste of your talents. And poor Robert. Imagine how devastated he'd be, learning his most trusted employee helped cover up those deaths. The garage lights flickered, casting shadows that danced like accusatory fingers across the concrete walls. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about revenge. It's not just about justice. It's about survival. I handed him the file. Lucas's triumphant smile lasted exactly 3 seconds, until he opened it and found blank pages. The real file is already with the authorities, I said quietly, along with a full confession about my role in the audit. Sometimes, Lucas, the only way to destroy a monster is to sacrifice yourself in the process. The look on his face was worth everything that would come next. The police interview room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Detective Morris slid crime scene photos across the table. The Riverside construction site from 7 years ago. Two bodies under collapsed scaffolding. You understand you're not under arrest, she said, studying my face. We're just following up on some new information. I stared at my reflection in the two-way mirror, wondering who else was watching. Lucas sent you the audit files. Among other things, she tapped one of the photos. The safety inspector's signature looks genuine, but the inspection dates were altered. Subtle work. Would have fooled most people. But not you. Here's what interests me, Miss Chen. Morris leaned forward. 3 days after the accident, someone accessed the digital records at 2 a.m., changed timestamps, modified reports. The login credentials belonged to Robert Walsh, but the IP address, my hands clenched under the table, traced to my apartment. Why protect Lucas Walsh? What did he have on you back then? The question hung in the air like smoke. Through the interview room window, I watched a uniformed officer escort someone down the hallway. Laura Walsh, Robert's wife, her face tear-stained but determined. I need a moment, I said, standing abruptly. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, remembering that night 7 years ago. The desperate phone call from Robert, his voice breaking as he explained what Lucas had done, begging me to help him protect the company, the workers' families, everything he'd built. My phone buzzed. Emma. Mom's talking to them. She found Dad's old journals. Lucas didn't act alone. Another message followed. The Riverside Project had a silent partner, someone who helped Lucas hide the safety violations. The bathroom door opened. Laura Walsh stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen her. They're reviewing Robert's hospital records, she said quietly. The medication changes, the timing of Lucas's visits. They think. She stopped, steadying herself against the sink. They think Lucas deliberately kept him confused, manipulated his signature on company documents while he was sedated. Laura, Don't, she held up a hand. I knew about the accident, the cover-up, all of it. I helped Lucas hide the evidence because he threatened to expose Robert's involvement in an earlier scandal. I chose my husband over those workers' families. Her eyes met mine in the mirror. Just like you chose Robert over the truth. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Does Robert know? He's asking for you. Laura's voice cracked. The doctors they say it might be time to say goodbye. I followed her out, past Detective Morris, who watched us with calculating eyes. In my pocket, my phone buzzed again. Daniel. Found something in the old project files. You need to see this now. At the hospital, Robert's room was eerily quiet except for the steady beep of monitors. He looked small in the bed, nothing like the powerful man who'd built an empire from nothing. Ariel, he whispered, gesturing me closer. I remember everything now. The Riverside Project? Lucas wasn't working alone. Save your strength, I started, but he gripped my hand with surprising force. The silent partner, he continued, the one who helped him hide the safety violations. It was. The monitor suddenly screamed. Medical staff rushed in, pushing us aside. Through the chaos, I saw Lucas in the doorway, watching with an expression I couldn't read. My phone buzzed one final time. I opened Daniel's message, a scanned document from the Riverside Project, the silent partner's signature clear as day at the bottom. My signature, not forged, not altered, mine. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Signing those papers late one night, trusting Lucas's assurances that it was just routine documentation. I'd been young, eager to prove myself to the company. I never read the fine print. Lucas caught my eye across the room and smiled. The same smile he'd given me that night 7 years ago. He'd played the long game, setting me up as his fall person before I even knew there was a game to play. Detective Morris appeared beside me, her expression grim. Miss Chin, we need to continue our discussion. Behind her, through the hospital room window, I watched Laura slip something into Robert's IV line, her movements quick and practiced. Nobody else seemed to notice. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning to show its true face. And I finally understood. In this family, everyone was both victim and villain, including me. Robert died at 3:47 a.m. I watched through the ICU window as Laura held his hand, her lips moving in what might have been prayer or confession. The monitors went silent one by one. Detective Morris found me in the hospital chapel an hour later. We need to talk about Laura Walsh. I stared at the flickering candles. She killed him. Can you prove it? My phone buzzed. Emma, Dad's office is being cleared out. Lucas already here with his lawyers, moving fast. The company's insurance policy, I said, standing. $8 million. Robert changed the beneficiary last month. Morris raised an eyebrow. To who? That's what Lucas is trying to find out. The drive to the office was a blur of red lights and rain. I found Emma in the parking garage, hands shaking as she smoked, a habit she'd quit years ago. Mom's not answering her phone, she said. The police questioned her about Dad's medication, then let her go. She just disappeared. Inside, Lucas's team was already gutting Robert's office. Through the glass walls, I watched them boxing up 30 years of memories like they were clearing out a foreclosed home. Looking for this. Lucas's mistress appeared beside me, waving a manila envelope. The insurance paperwork. Interesting reading. Where did you... Your desk drawer, the one you thought was locked. She smiled, all teeth and triumph. Lucas wants to see you. Alone. I found him in the conference room, Robert's death certificate spread out on the table like a battle plan. Natural causes, he said without looking up. Very neat, very clean. Mother always was efficient. What do you want? A trade. He slid a document across the table. Sign over your shares in the company, and this evidence about your involvement in the Riverside accident stays buried. My hands clenched. I don't have any shares. Don't you? His smile mirrored his mistress's. Check the insurance policy. Father's last gift to his most trusted employee. 30% ownership transferred the day before he died, before Mother could intervene. The room tilted sideways. Robert had known about Laura, about Lucas, about all of it. He'd planned one final move in a game I hadn't even known we were playing. My phone buzzed again. Daniel, found Laura, storage unit on 5th. You need to see this now. Tick-tock, Lucas said, tapping his watch. The board meets in an hour to vote on the company's future. With your shares plus Emma's, you could block my takeover. Or, he gestured at the document, you can walk away clean. Your choice. I left him there, his offer hanging in the air like smoke. In the elevator, another text from Daniel. She kept everything, every document, every photo, the whole truth about the Riverside accident. The storage unit was small, cramped with filing cabinets. Laura sat on a folding chair in the center, surrounded by open boxes and scattered papers. I had to protect him, she said without looking up. Robert knew what Lucas had done, but he couldn't bear to turn in his own son, so I helped, just like you did. By killing him? By freeing him. She held out a USB drive. Everything's here. Lucas's original safety reports, the real inspection records, proof that he deliberately used faulty equipment to cut costs, enough to put him away for manslaughter. Why now? Because Robert changed the game. She finally met my eyes. Those shares he left you? They came with a letter. Read it. My phone buzzed one last time. Emma. Board meeting starting early. Lucas claiming Dad wasn't competent when he transferred the shares. We need you here now. I looked at Laura, at the USB drive, at the decades of secrets boxed and labeled around us, at the evidence that could destroy Lucas but would take us all down with him. What's it going to be, Ariel? Laura asked softly. Justice or revenge? Because you can't have both. The choice crystallized in that moment, clear and terrible as broken glass. I took the drive already knowing what Robert's letter would say, already knowing what I had to do. Sometimes the only way to end a game is to burn the board. The board meeting erupted into chaos the moment I walked in. Lucas stood at the head of the table, Robert's letter crushed in his fist. "This is a forgery," he snarled, throwing the paper aside. "My father would never give 30% of his company to a secretary." "Show them the drive," Emma whispered beside me. The USB from Laura felt like a live grenade in my pocket. I placed it on the table instead. Everything's here. The Riverside accident, the forged inspections, the shell companies. More lies, Lucas's mistress cut in, but her voice wavered, including your real identity. I met her eyes. Or should I say, Detective Morris's daughter. The room went silent. Lucas's face drained of color as his mistress, Sarah Morris, stood slowly. "How did you—" "Laura kept everything," I said, "including the photos of you visiting your mother at the police station. The same detective who's been investigating the Riverside deaths for 7 years." Sarah's mask cracked. "Dad was one of those workers. And Lucas promised to help you find the truth," I finished. "Except he already knew it, because he caused the accident." Lucas lunged across the table, but Daniel was faster, pinning him back. "Play the files," Daniel growled. I plugged in the drive. The projector hummed to life, displaying safety reports, bank transfers, emails, 7 years of carefully documented evidence. "Stop," Lucas commanded, but his voice had lost its power. Those workers' deaths were tragic accidents. They were murder. Detective Morris stepped into the room, Laura behind her. Premeditated cost-cutting that led to 2 deaths, and everyone in this room helped cover it up. The weight of her words settled like dust after an explosion. Board members shifted uncomfortably, avoiding each other's eyes. "Including you, Ariel," Morris continued. "Your signature is on those falsified reports. You're as guilty as anyone. That's why Robert gave her the shares," Emma realized aloud. "He knew she was the only one who'd risk everything to expose the truth." Lucas broke free from Daniel's grip. "You're all forgetting something." He pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. "Those shell companies? They're not just hiding fraud. They're hiding something much bigger, something that could bring down half the city's development projects." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Construction permits, safety inspections, zoning variances. How deep did the corruption go? "One call," Lucas said softly, "and everything burns. The company, the projects, everyone's careers. How many families will that destroy, Ariel? How many lives will your revenge wreck?" My phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number, a video clip of Robert recorded the night before he died. "Play it," Laura said. He wanted everyone to hear this. Robert's face filled the screen, gaunt but determined. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. And the truth about our company, my company, is finally coming to light. The Riverside accident wasn't the beginning. The corruption goes back decades. I always knew, and I did nothing." Tears streamed down Laura's face as Robert continued. "But someone else knew too. Someone who spent 11 years trying to fix my mistakes, protect our workers, maintain what little integrity we had left. Ariel, I'm leaving you my shares not as a reward, but as a burden, because you're the only one strong enough to bear it." The video ended. Lucas's phone slipped from his fingers. The number for his conspirators never dialed. "It's over," Sarah whispered, moving away from Lucas. Dad can finally rest. But Lucas smiled, that same predatory smile from the day he fired me. Nothing's over. You really think Robert was clean? That precious USB drive contains enough evidence to destroy everyone in this room, including your precious mentor, Ariel. So go ahead, burn it all down. Just remember, you'll burn too. He was right. The evidence would implicate everyone: Robert, Laura, Emma, me. The company would collapse. Hundreds would lose their jobs. The city's biggest projects would halt. My finger hovered over the projector's power button. One press and the truth would remain hidden. Another, and everything would be exposed. Robert's words echoed in my head, not as a reward, but as a burden. I looked at Emma, tears in her eyes. At Daniel, his jaw set. At Laura, nodding slowly. At Sarah, her father's justice finally within reach. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about being strong enough to destroy yourself. I pressed play. The police arrived at dawn. Through the boardroom windows, I watched them lead Lucas away in handcuffs, his empire crumbling in real time. But it wasn't over. The Riverside families are filing a class action, Emma said, spreading newspapers across the conference table. They're naming everyone: the company, the board, the inspectors. Us, I finished. Sarah Morris stood in the doorway, her detective mother beside her. There's a way to contain this. The DA's offering immunity? No. The word came out sharper than intended. Robert didn't give me these shares so I could cut deals. Then what's your play? Daniel asked. The company's bleeding. Contractors are pulling out. We have 300 workers who'll lose everything. My phone buzzed. Laura. Storage unit emptied. Everything gone. I looked up to find Lucas's mistress watching me, her mask finally stripped away. The evidence disappeared an hour ago, she said. Mom's investigation just hit a dead end. The room went silent. Detective Morris's hand moved to her weapon. Funny thing about evidence, I said, pulling out my own phone. Robert taught me to always keep backups. I pressed play, and Lucas's voice filled the room. Those workers had to die. Dad was going to discover the embezzlement. The scaffolding collapse covered everything: the missing funds, the fake contracts. Sarah's father was just convenient. Sarah's face went white. When did you? The night you thought you were seducing company secrets out of me. I met her eyes. That drink you kept refilling? Works both ways. Detective Morris moved faster than I expected, but Daniel was closer. He caught her arm as Emma blocked the door. That recording is inadmissible, Morris snarled. It's not for court. I stood, Robert's letter heavy in my pocket. It's for them. The boardroom doors opened. The Riverside victims' families filed in, faces I'd lived with in my nightmares for 7 years. Sarah's mother, the other worker's widow. Their children, older now but still carrying the weight of their loss. You all deserve to know the truth, I said. Not the sanitized version that'll play out in court. The real truth, about Robert, about Lucas, about all of us. Ariel, Emma warned, but I continued. We're going to dissolve the company, transfer all assets to a victims' compensation fund. The Riverside families get controlling interest. You can't, Sarah started. Actually, I can. Robert's shares plus Emma's make it legal. I pulled out the dissolution papers. It's done. Detective Morris's laugh was bitter. And what about justice? My ex-husband died on that scaffold. And your daughter helped cover it up. To protect Lucas, to protect herself. I met Sarah's eyes. Just like I did. Just like we all did. The weight of confession filled the room like cement setting. Through the windows, I could see Lucas being placed in a police car, his face a mask of fury. What happens now? One of the Riverside widows asked. Now we build something new. Emma stepped forward, spreading blueprints across the table. A joint venture, worker-owned, transparent, everything we should have been from the start. With the original families in control, Daniel added. No more shortcuts, no more secrets. Detective Morris studied me for a long moment. You're sacrificing everything, your career, your reputation. Robert sacrificed 2 lives to protect his legacy. I cut in. Lucas sacrificed his humanity to steal it. I touched the company logo, remembering my first day, young and naive and full of hope. I'm breaking the cycle. Sarah moved to her mother's side. I'll testify about everything. Lucas, the cover-up, my role in it. One by one, the Riverside families approached the table. They looked at the blueprints, at the dissolution papers, at each other. Years of grief and anger hung in the air between us. It won't bring them back, Sarah's mother said finally. No, I agreed, but maybe it'll help build something worthy of their memory. Outside, the police car carrying Lucas pulled away. The empire he'd killed for, schemed for, destroyed lives for, gone in a morning's work. But as I watched the families begin to talk, to plan, to heal, I realized something Robert had known all along. Sometimes the greatest act of revenge is choosing not to let the past destroy the future. Emma squeezed my hand. Together, we began to rebuild. The prison visiting room smelled of industrial cleaner and regret. Lucas sat across from me, orange jumpsuit stark against his pale skin. 3 months into his sentence, the predatory gleam in his eyes had dulled to something almost human. Sarah testified yesterday, I said, watching his reaction. The DA's adding conspiracy charges. Did you come to gloat? His voice was hoarse, unused. I came to give you this. I slid Robert's final letter across the table. He wrote it the night before he died, before Laura. Lucas's hands trembled as he opened it. Mom's plea deal? House arrest, in exchange for everything she knows about the company's history, the real history. The letter shook in his grip. I'd memorized its contents, Robert's confession of his own corrupt past, his hope for redemption, his final understanding that some legacies deserve to die. The Riverside families broke ground yesterday, I continued. Their new construction company, worker-owned, like we discussed. Emma and Daniel are helping them set up proper safety protocols. And you? Lucas looked up, his father's eyes staring back at me. Still playing the avenging angel? Actually, I'm leaving construction. I stood, straightening my jacket. The SEC offered me a position, investigating corporate fraud. His laugh was bitter. How perfectly ironic. You taught me well. I turned to go, then paused. There's something else. In the evidence room at the old office, bottom drawer behind the audit files. What is it? Proof that you didn't act alone on the Riverside project, that someone else approved the faulty equipment before you even came back. I met his eyes. Someone who could have stopped it all 7 years ago, but chose to look the other way. Someone who has to live with that choice every day. Understanding dawned on his face. You're not so different from me, are you? That's why I had to stop you. I touched the visitor's log, my signature next to his name. We're all capable of becoming monsters. The trick is choosing not to. Outside, Emma waited in her truck. How'd he take it? About as well as Robert did when he finally admitted his own guilt. She nodded toward the construction site across the street. The Riverside family's new company logo shone in the sunlight. Phoenix Construction, rising together. They're hiring, you know, Emma said quietly. Could always use someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. That's exactly why I can't stay. I watched the workers laying foundation, doing things right this time. Some legacies need to end. My phone buzzed. Detective Morris. Found something in the old files. We need to talk. Another skeleton? Emma asked. There's always another skeleton. I smiled, remembering Robert's words. The truth isn't always clean, but it's all we have. The construction site's radio crackled with familiar voices. Sarah Morris directing safety checks, her mother supervising from the ground. Their own redemption story, built on the ashes of ours. You know what's funny? I said, watching them work. Lucas thought revenge meant destroying everything, but sometimes it means building something better. Emma finished. I touched the SEC badge in my pocket, thinking of all the other companies out there, all the other Lucas Walshes hiding behind corporate walls, all the secrets waiting to be uncovered. Keep in touch? Emma asked as I headed for my car. Always. I looked back at the prison one last time. Someone has to remember how this story really ended. The construction site's foundation stretched out before me, solid and true. No shortcuts this time, no hidden cracks. Just honest work and the chance to build something new from the wreckage of the past. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number. A message appeared. Some secrets stay buried, for now. I deleted it without replying. There would be other battles, other truths to uncover. But this chapter was ending, and with it, the weight of 11 years of compromise and complicity. Sometimes revenge isn't about who wins or loses. Sometimes it's about making sure the same story doesn't repeat itself. I drove away from Phoenix Construction, from the prison, from the ghosts of Robert and Lucas, and everything we'd built and destroyed together. In my rearview mirror, the new foundation gleamed like a promise. Some legacies deserve to die, but from their ashes, something honest can grow.